We're reading Ezekiel 1, verse 1 to chapter 2, verse 5. In my 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kibar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel, the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kibar River, in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. I looked, and I saw a wind storm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The centre of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like this. Each of the 4 had the face of a human being, and on the right side each had the face of a lion, and on the left the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. They each had 2 wings spreading out upward, each wing touching that of the creature on either side, and each had 2 other wings covering its body. Each one went straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, without turning as they went. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire, or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved, and when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, and the wheels would rise along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, they also moved. When the creatures stood still, they also stood still. And when the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Spread out above the heads of the living creatures was what looked like something like a vault, sparkling like crystal and awesome. Under the vault, their wings were stretched out, one toward the other, and each had 2 wings covering its body. When the creatures moved, I heard the sound of their wings, like the roar of rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of an army. When they stood still, they lowered their wings. Then there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and above it, on the throne, was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him. Like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down, and I heard the voice of one speaking. He said to me, "Son of man, stand up on your feet, and I will speak to you." As he spoke, the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet, and I heard him speaking to me. He said, "Son of man, I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. The people to whom I am sending you are obstinate and stubborn. Say to them, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says.' And whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them."
Friends, what a reading. Ezekiel certainly starts with a bang, doesn't it? Winged creatures with animal faces, thunder and lightning and blazing fire, wheels within wheels, covered in eyes. What is this crazy prophet on about? What is this crazy vicar on about, getting us to read Ezekiel? Why would we bother reading this at church? Today we're starting a new series, and if that hasn't scared you off, well done. We're going to be reading through Ezekiel over the next couple of months, this challenging book from a prophet from millennia ago. Like so many things that look a little overwhelming at first, challenging, I'm confident that we will actually find this is well worth the while, because we'll find in here words of hope, words of conviction, glorious words. Words that ultimately draw us towards the glory of God, who is the only hope for a chaotic and crumbling world. Perhaps you think I'm being a little pessimistic, chaotic and crumbling world. But consider for a moment the wars that are raging and seemingly intractable around the world. Consider the climate crisis, a source of angst for so many, the difficulties that lots of people have finding housing, massive cultural shifts in our society in recent years, the mental health epidemic affecting particularly young people. For those of us who call ourselves Christians, do we reckon with the fact that church affiliation has been declining in this country for 60 years? Consider the reputation that we as a church now have. Sadly, not a reputation for compassion and love. We're no longer a pillar of the community or a trusted institution. No, far too often we have a deserved reputation for abuse, for hard-heartedness, for being part of the problem, not the solution. So far from feeling stable for many of us, whether we call ourselves Christians or not, it can feel like the world is crumbling and chaotic. And yet into that world, into our world, Ezekiel has this message of glory, of judgment, and of grace. Glory, judgment, grace. Perhaps on the way in you saw the big Bible timeline by the door. Did anyone have a look and try and find Ezekiel on it? Can be a little challenge on the way out afterwards. Poor Ezekiel, big long book, 48 chapters, only gets one measly little panel on the Bible timeline, but it gives you a sense of where Ezekiel fits in the overall timeline of God's history with his people, from creation at the very beginning through to where the kingdom of Israel splits into a northern kingdom and southern kingdom. You can see that there on the timeline I've got on the screen. And you can see down the bottom there where it says down Babylon, up Babylon, right? That's the exile to Babylon. And that's roughly where we are with Ezekiel. But let's dig into that. So where are we? And when are we? What's the context for Ezekiel? What's he speaking to? Well, very helpfully, Ezekiel gives us some pointers in the first few verses. So have a look at the first few verses with me in verse 1, because understanding this historical context really helps us understand what God's word is saying to us. So verse 1, in my 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kibar River, the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kibar River in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. So firstly, where are we? Where in the world are we? Well, the Kibar River is in the land of Babylon. You can see the little flag next to Babylon there. That's where we are. The Kibar River, well, we're fudging a little. It's really an irrigation channel, I think, but we'll call it a river. But it is connected to the mighty Euphrates River. So we're in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, right? A hub of civilization for a long time before Ezekiel's day. And we're by the Kibar River. Babylon is a regional superpower at the time. You might remember from the Old Testament that Assyria had been a superpower. Well, Babylon have conquered Assyria. They own that whole region along the rivers, but more than that as well. And Ezekiel is in Babylon, and it says among the exiles, because he is not from Babylon, he is from Judah, from the land of Israel. You can see the other flag in the orange area on the left-hand side of the map. He's from Judah, and it says he is a priest, Ezekiel the priest. But he's not at the temple where priests are meant to work. He's not at the temple in Jerusalem. He's not even in Jerusalem at all, because he has been taken from Jerusalem into exile by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, when they conquered Judea 5 years earlier. It's the 5th year since the exile of King Jehoiakim of Judah, it tells us in verse 2. So it means we can actually date this to 593 BC. That's when we are, about 600 years before Jesus, 593 BC. We have archaeological evidence. There are Babylonian writings as well as Israelite writings describing this invasion and the conquering of Judah by Babylon. And what happened was the cream of Judean society, their leaders, their priests, the educated, the king, they are taken into forced exile in Babylon. Babylon come in, they conquer the place, and it's kind of a decapitation strategy. We're going to take all the leaders away. Listen to how 2 Kings 24 describes it earlier in the Old Testament. In the 8th year of the reign of the king of Babylon, he took Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, prisoner. As the Lord had declared, Nebuchadnezzar removed the treasures from the temple of the Lord and from the royal palace. He carried all Jerusalem into exile, all the officers and fighting men and all the skilled workers and artisans, officials and prominent people of the land, a total of 10,000. Only the poorest people of the land were left. So Jerusalem has fallen. The temple is ransacked. God's choice of king is deposed. And the educated, the powerful amongst the people, they are taken out of the promised land and into exile. And Ezekiel, as a priest, is taken with them. Perhaps he's singing with Simon and Garfunkel, right? By the rivers of Babylon, I sat down and wept as I remembered Zion. That's the mood, right? Nebuchadnezzar installs a puppet king called Zedekiah to rule in Jerusalem. And so this remnant lives on in the land, but now they are subjugated and oppressed. And so that's where we are. And Ezekiel's message, this book, which has this series of prophetic visions and messages, it's as much for those who are left back in Judah as it is for Ezekiel and those who are with him in exile in Babylon. So that's kind of when and where we are. We're in crisis, right? Let's jump into chapter 1. And I want to say 3 things to highlight from this weird vision. And it is weird, and that's the beauty of it, actually. Because it shows Ezekiel and it shows us, if we're willing to listen to a message from a very different culture, from a very different time, it shows us that when the world is crumbling, God is still on his throne. When the world is crumbling, God is still on his throne. Actually, Ezekiel's world isn't just crumbling. It has crumbled. Right? At the age of 30, he should be beginning his work as a priest in the temple. That was the age you were meant to start. Offering sacrifices to God, giving words of forgiveness and assurance to the people, enjoying the bounty of the promised land under the benevolent leadership of God's anointed king. That's how life should be for Ezekiel. It's not how life is. Instead, his people have been conquered. His family and community have been displaced. He's somewhere between a refugee and a prisoner of war. He's a refugee in the sense that he's had to flee his homeland, leave his home. He's a prisoner of war in the sense that he's kind of being held there by force. He can't go back if he wants to. It looks like their God has failed them, right? The temple, the city, the king, the land, the very pillars on which their society was based, the very pillars on which their relationship with God was based, these pillars have crumbled. It's an existential crisis. Who are we now if we've lost so much? I hear voices from time to time decrying the decline of Christianity in the West. Perhaps some of us feel this angst, this disappointment, this sadness, decline of Christian influence in our culture and in our society. And there are things to grieve and lament there. But I also want to say, if we think we've got it bad and Christendom is crumbling here, spare a thought for Ezekiel. Spare a thought for Ezekiel and his fellow exiles. Their world has disintegrated. And yet, into that void, God appears. God appears not actually in Jerusalem, not in the temple where God belongs, right? But in Babylon, in this violent, pagan, oppressive empire that is actively subjugating God's people. God joins them, as it were, in exile. So let's think for a little about the vision, about what is described, what Ezekiel sees. Let's have a think about what it might be communicating, because we have these four living creatures, right? Each with a big wheel at their feet and wings touching each other. You have to imagine I have my robes on still, like I did at 8:30, and then I have my wings, right? You can imagine. We'll get to the faces in just a moment. But think of these four creatures in a square, and above their heads it says a vault, like a platform. And on top of the platform is a throne. We've got like an artist's impression here, right? In the fire at the bottom, you might be able to make out the four living creatures and the wheels, and the platform and the throne on top. These are artist's impressions. I can make no promises that this is what it looked like to Ezekiel, but you can read and decide how accurate you think they've been. Compare. You know how the Pope has a Pope-mobile? Anyone seen the Pope-mobile? There's a picture to help you imagine. Helps him get around and be with the people, right? Well, this is the God-mobile, right? Ezekiel's vision is the God-mobile. I heard a friend describe it as a wheelchair. I think the correct ancient term was chariot, right? This is God's chariot, his throne chariot. And one thing is clear. From the wings and the wheels and the Spirit effortlessly coordinating the movement, one thing is clear. God's throne is mobile. He's not tied down. He's not tied to Jerusalem. He's not tied to the temple. He's not tied to the promised land even. He reigns, his throne is in Babylon, just as easily as it is anywhere else in the world. He reigns in Babylon too. What good news for Ezekiel. God reigns in Babylon too. And these awesome living creatures with 4 faces, right? Think about the faces for a moment. Human on the front, lion, ox, and eagle on the back. Like some kind of awesome beast out of a fantasy series. Now they have a human face. You might be able to make out some of the faces there. They have a human face, right? Humans, supreme over all God's creatures. The face of a lion, supreme amongst the wild beasts. The ox, the strongest of all the domesticated animals. And the eagle, the king of the birds, king of the skies. Right? So each of these faces is telling us these are supreme creatures. Supreme. They don't run or fly, they glide effortlessly in response to God's Spirit. They have eyes all around on their wheels, right? I think it's telling us they can see in each and every direction. Nothing escapes their gaze. You can't sneak up behind them, right? Because they've got a face on every side. They are supreme. Actually, the lion and the ox were often worshipped in ancient pagan religions. But in Ezekiel's vision, these awesome creatures, they're called cherubim later in Ezekiel, not in this passage, but later, cherubim. But actually they look supreme, but actually they are mere attendants, mere servants. They're carrying the platform, as it were. They are on a totally different level from God who reigns over all. Totally different level. They are creatures. He is their creator, the Lord over all, the Lord God. He's literally on a different level. And so whatever might be happening in Ezekiel's world, God is still on his throne. He is not tied down. He's not defeated. May look like the things he promised had crumbled, but God is still reigning. So friends, when we feel that sense that our world is crumbling, take a breath. Don't give way to fear. Don't despair. Even when it looks like the world is taking a bad turn. And remember, God is still on his throne. Years ago, Arla and I spent time with an older Christian couple, older married couple, before our wedding as part of our preparation. They told us how whatever was happening in their life, and particularly when something rocked them and really shook them, when life took a bad turn, when things seemed out of control, they would remind each other with these words. They would say, God is still on his throne. God is still in control. Don't panic. Don't give way to fear. Don't despair. Whatever might crumble in our world, God is still on his throne. Ezekiel needed to hear that. And perhaps we do too. Secondly, this vision shows us that in a chaotic and evil world, God is still glorious. God is still glorious. Again and again, we hear in this passage, Ezekiel is blinded. Verse 4, I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. Then there's burning fire mentioned, there's gleaming metal, there's precious stones, there's the rainbow. All the most dazzling images that Ezekiel would know, right? He's never seen the spotlights on a stage, right? But all the most dazzling images he would know. If the throne and the attendants are a sign of God's sovereignty, well, the smoke and the fire and the blazing light show us God's glory and his holiness. Think about Moses on Mount Sinai, smoke and fire. Isaiah's vision in the temple, smoke and fire. It is all telling us that God is scarily glorious. So be careful. Be careful. Actually. And when Ezekiel realizes in verse 28 that this is not just the glory of the Lord, but the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, well, he falls face down. Because God's glory is overwhelming. It's too much for him. Even the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God is overwhelming. It's not just the light, it's not just the thunderous noise, it's everything. Have you ever stood under a waterfall, like a big waterfall, and the noise is just so loud and it's just all over you and you can't hear yourself think? It's impossible to be aware of anything that's happening outside the waterfall. It's just overwhelming. Well, God's presence is like that. He overwhelms our senses, overwhelms our heart and our body. It is an awesome thing to meet the God of glory. Now, there's a lot of other things that might overwhelm us in life. There's no shortage of evil and chaos in the world. I don't know what you lose sleep over. If it's big macro things out there like Russian aggression in Ukraine or wars in the Middle East or malign influences on your children. You might simply feel powerless in the face of rising interest rates and costs. Maybe you worry about rising sea levels, extreme politics. There's so much in the news that might overwhelm us. But if you think the world is overwhelming, and it can be, I'm not denying that, but take heart, be encouraged. It's got nothing on God. It's got nothing on God. The darkness cannot dim his glory. Even in a chaotic and evil world, God remains holy and glorious, bigger and brighter and better. So again, don't despair. It's easy to feel trapped in our circumstances, but we are not trapped in our circumstances because God's glory is undiminished. He can and will bring about a different future. In a chaotic and evil world, God is still glorious. Well, Ezekiel falls face down, and as if this isn't enough, we reach the climax of this scene as the Lord begins to speak from his throne. The Spirit of God raises up Ezekiel, and God says to him in chapter 2, verse 3, "Son of man, I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. The people to whom I'm sending you are obstinate and stubborn." Are we picking up the point here, right? "And say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. And whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been amongst them." We're going to listen to more of God's call and God's words to Ezekiel next week as Luke digs into chapter 2 for us. But for today, I hope you can see, and here's the third point to take to heart today, that to rebellious people, God is still speaking. To rebellious people, God is still speaking. Now, remember, God has wooed these people. He loves them. He has rescued them. He has chosen them and blessed them and protected them and loved them. He has heaped his favours on them. He's been generous to them almost to a fault. But they are a rebellious nation. Both they and their ancestors, that's Ezekiel's generation and those before him, they're up in arms against God. They are obstinate and stubborn. They haven't learnt from that first defeat when Jerusalem was sacked the first time. Spoilers, it's going to happen again. And yet still, God doesn't totally give up on them. He doesn't give them the silent treatment. He will judge their sin. Yes, that's part of Ezekiel's message. That's in there. But he continues to call them through his prophet Ezekiel. Now, of course, it's not only the Israelites of Ezekiel's day who are rebellious, who failed to treat God as God and trust him and love him and give him thanks in return. People of all nations, then and now, are rebellious against God. God has heaped his kindness and grace on me. And yet how often do I ignore him, take him for granted, do what I want to do, not what God would have me do, what he's made me for? How often do I live my life without reference to God and his purposes? We are all rebellious people at heart, wanting to run things our own way. We all need God's kindness. Perhaps today you're particularly anxious about someone in particular, someone you love who is kind of unrepentantly rebelling against God. It might be a friend, it might be a child or a grandchild, someone you know and love who is walking away from God, walking the opposite direction, giving up on Jesus. Friends, I think this passage encourages us that even when his people have abandoned him wholesale and not listened to warning after warning after warning that he's given them before, God continues to speak to them. He continues to call out to them. Listen to what God tells Ezekiel. Whether they listen or they fail to listen, you can't control that, Ezekiel. They're rebellious people. Whether they listen or fail to listen, God says sooner or later they will know that they have been hearing from God, that you, Ezekiel, are a prophet. That's what that means, right? That he's a true prophet. And so throughout the book of Ezekiel, even amidst the gloom and the judgment, we hear this repeated refrain. God says again and again, he is doing this so that they will know that I am the Lord. So that you will know that I am the Lord. So that they will know that I am the Lord. 34 times through this book. God's motivation, both for the judgment that is coming and for the grace that is coming. God's motivation for both is the same. And he keeps speaking to rebellious people, even to you and I today. He keeps speaking so that we will know that he is the Lord, that he is the true God, that he is the one alone we are to worship. But that's a tough message for Ezekiel to share, especially if no one wants to listen. It's a tough message for us to believe and to share as well. And so God gives Ezekiel this awesome vision, right? To encourage him to persevere, to trust God and his words in this scary, crumbling time. But what about for you and I, right? Ezekiel gets this vision. We too face a crumbling Christendom, a world of chaos and evil. There are many who rebel against God today. Well, we're not quite called to be prophets like Ezekiel, but as we read the Bible, we too acknowledge that this is the word of the Lord, right? God is speaking to us too when the Bible is read. And so we too are called to bear witness to the gospel, to share God's words. Whether others are ready to listen or not, we hold them out that people might hear. So Ezekiel got this awesome vision to empower him. What about us? Right? What about you and me? Where's our vision, God? Because I don't know about you, but God has never given me a vision like this of crazy living creatures with 4 faces and 4 wings spread wide and feet like a calf, it says. These creatures that radiate his glory like a nuclear reactor, right? But actually, God has given me one living creature. Not with 4 faces, but just one human face. He doesn't have 4 wings, but he has 2 arms spread wide in love. He doesn't have the feet of a calf, just normal human feet. He didn't come in a blaze of glory, but a star shone overhead at his birth. He didn't carry the throne, but he carried the cross. And yet God's glory shone nonetheless brightly from him. Here is what God has done for us. God has made his light to shine in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. In the face of Jesus Christ. As we look at the face of Jesus Christ, as we read of him, as we meet him in God's word, we see the awesome glory of God. Face to face. We see this awesome God with his mobile throne chariot, not in a way that will overwhelm and consume us, but in a way that invites us in. He has come to us not in this scary, overwhelming, weird vision, but he came to us as a human in a manger, a humble baby. And so if we want to know the sovereign God who reigns above a crumbling Christendom, the glorious God who will one day consume all the chaos and evil, both out there and in here, in our hearts, and put it all to rights, then listen, because he is still calling to rebellious people today, even to you and I. And he says, like he says to Ezekiel, I have not abandoned you. I am with you, whatever you're going through. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. This is where we see the glory, the overwhelming glory of God, where God himself dwells with us in human form, so that we too may know that he alone is the Lord. That he alone is the Lord.